On this podcast, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to pick winners, Scott, and we think that Augment is a winner.
Usage of the product has just grown from nothing to six figures of developers using the technology. AI doesn't have a vision today for how you want to evolve software.
I don't see a lot of competition doing what you guys do exactly.
Code bases you find in the enterprise where they're not 20 million lines of code, but 200 million lines of code.
What would you consider the big things that, like you're not going to get anywhere else?
Yo, thank you for tuning in to What the Future. Today we're diving into one of the hottest debates in AI for code. What's going to happen with software development? Is computer science still going to be a sought after major? And if my kids are watching, the answer is yes, absolutely. Computer science, machine learning, AI, data science, all gold. Daddy approved. So to dive into that market, we tapped into an old friend, Scott Dietzen, also known as Dietz. Dietz was the CEO at Pure Storage. He's now joined with Mike Spicer, who is also like Pure Storage at Augment Code. He is the initial investor and the founding CEO. So we've seen these two guys do it before. They disrupted that market and set the standard for flash storage. So I love the people. I love the idea. But even more, I like their go-to-market strategy and making it completely self-service for the customer. Could this be the future of tech sales? Just might be. Thanks for tuning in. We got to change the game.
If you're talking about AI, you're often talking about how software development is going to be impacted by AI. There's a lot of buzz everywhere, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today with Scott Dietzen, also known as Dietz. Thanks for joining us, Dietz.
Sandesh, Chris, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a fun one. So, what I would love to hear from you is a little bit around how did you end up here? I heard you retired, didn't know you're in the game, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about your career, your journey, and then how you ended up at Augment.
Yeah, let me go back in time first. So I actually completed a PhD in machine learning a very long time ago, a different era of AI. It was the era of symbolic reasoning. But believe it or not, I had Jeff Hinton as one of my AI professors. And I followed his career. And, he took a lot of grief back then because the symbolic reasoning camp didn't think neural networks were ever going to amount to anything. Wind the clock forward, and I was incredibly excited to see large language models emerge and their capabilities. And now, in between, of course, I spent 20 odd years doing 4 system software startups, the most recent being Pure Storage. Every one of them depended on really large, complex code bases and had a brilliant team of engineers to try to bring those code bases forward and evolve them. And it was so painful, that process of trying to deliver a fast, performant, reliable, secure software base and being able to move it forward efficiently. And so it was these two threads of my career: the pain of software engineering and then appreciation for machine learning. That I had this fear of missing out, that these two streams are going to come together, and I very much wanted to be part of it, and I wanted to help software engineers because I'd spent so much of my career feeling their pain.
That's great. That's awesome. So you've lived it, so now you can actually try to fix it, which is very cool. Um, on this podcast, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to pick winners, Scott, and we think that Augment is a winner. So the structure that we have is I'm kind of the sales guy, and Chris is the technical SC that actually knows the smart stuff. So what we'd like to get into a little bit more is really what we would discuss in a sales pitch. So maybe we start off at Augment. Tell us a little bit about the company, how you guys started, what do you guys do?
Yeah, so we had a small team. There are 2 co-founders that I work very closely with. Guy Garari, who is lead researcher at Google, did a bunch of the work that became the Gemini large language models. And then his co-founder, Igor Ostrovsky, was the chief architect of FlashBlade at Pure Storage. And he had spent a year plus reinventing himself around AI technology. We had, some significant system software expertise. And so, this was before ChatGPT, but we were seeing the potential of large language models to help manage code. There's so much detail in tens of millions of line monorepos. There's just no simple changes in a code base of that scale. And it's very hard for humans to keep everything in their head while they're working through a complex change, right? You update one file and then you're jumping around the code base, and then somebody interrupts you and you're like, oh, where was I? There's a lot of tedium and painful drudgery associated in that task. And we thought large language models could help. So we got started, and then ChatGPT launched, and along came GitHub Copilot. And I would say the big development was all the vibe coding space, especially as the models got better. But we started at the opposite end of the spectrum. We set out to help software engineers. So these are individuals that are looking after really large, complex code bases. Maybe for networking or storage or security or database or large SaaS applications. So we wanted to be able to tackle the big, hard problems. And so that was, what we set out to go solve, was AI for software engineering.
You mentioned a term there. I just want to make sure everybody understands vibe coding, because that's kind of a big deal, right?
The term was coined by Andrei Karpathy, who's just a brilliant leading mind in AI. But it comes out of people that say aren't software experts at all, but have an idea that they would like to make a simple little application out of.Maybe it's a weekend project. It's often also called 0 to 1, right? So I don't have any code. I have an idea. I talk. I have a dialogue with the AI, and out of it comes a simple product that I can use. But it's on the scale of generally a weekend to a week, couple weeks of work to create something, and that's kind of where vibe coding stops. The other end of the spectrum is the large enterprise with tens of millions of lines of existing code that has so much built-in history and knowledge in there that you need to be able to understand before you can actually be effective at evolving that code base. And that's where Augment set our sights.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that's really interesting about what you're doing is you see so much, like you mentioned, GitHub Copilot and things like that, and that's a lot of folks doing like using AI to do even vibe coding and things like that. But you're focused on what's the bigger picture here, and I don't think not everybody entirely realizes how many artifacts there are in a large software development project, and how nearly impossible it is to keep everything in sync and produce all that too, right? I mean, can you talk about the incredible nature of sprawl in some of these projects?
Yeah, if you look at in open source land, I mean, you've got big projects like Chromium, for example, Linux, and so on. But those code bases are actually tiny compared to some of the code bases you find in the enterprise, where they're not 20 million lines of code, but 200 million lines of code, where no engineer has any understanding of how all the pieces fit together, right? The best you can hope for is to understand your portion, your end of the world. And these code bases are vastly too large to pass as context to any AI model. It's very computationally expensive. It costs the square of the size of the code base to try to pass it as context. And for a large code base, there's just no way for the AI model to digest it. And so that was the problem we had to go off and solve. How can we take a monstrously large and complex, sophisticated code base, and how can we teach the AI everything it needs to know in real time about that code base to accomplish the task at hand?
Yeah, I remember an anecdote from a coder that I knew who worked for a very large OS developer that I won't mention, but he said he came across a piece of code and it said, "You may think you know what this does, but you don't. Do not touch this." But I mean, there's a lot of things, even in like the biggest companies, you have this institutional knowledge that, doesn't get transferred. You have a lot of stuff that doesn't get documented properly, and it gets really hard to figure out what's going on.
Indeed. One of our early customers, Webflow, the chief architect had this epiphany because his senior leadership team spent a significant portion of their time, I think it was 25-30%, onboarding new hires and helping them discover how to be productive inside of their complex code base. And that's a substantial amount of senior architect time. And the ramp time is tough on the new hires, and they've got to queue up to ask their questions and so on. They found that Augment could deliver that mentoring 7x24 and do it as effectively or better than the chief and lead architects on the team. And so you had somebody that could give you a tour, help you understand the things that you were missing, might even look and say, hey, this documentation is inconsistent with how the software really works. Can I fix it for you? Or this code looks redundant. Can I delete it and reuse this code instead? So that ability to kind of get onboarded with much more help is transformative.
Yeah, I mean, one of the criticisms of AI has been that it's been focused largely in the sort of creative human work. It was supposed to take away the drudgery, but now it's doing all the graphics and the fun stuff that everybody wanted to do. Humans are being left to do the drudgery stuff. But I think that what's cool about what you're doing is you're really focusing on that drudgery stuff that is just way too much for people to, like handle, or would they want to even live in that world where they have to handle all that?
There's so much redundant and tedious work associated with software development. All the time, we're now in this situation where, a new class gets implemented and then the engineer says to the AI, hey, go crank out a set of unit tests and run them and let me know how it goes and report back to me if there are problems or, if you find an issue, can you fix it? So engineers have the freedom to stay involved in the areas that they care about. And usually those are the creative, inspirational tasks. AI doesn't have a vision today for how you want to evolve software, where you want to take it, what you want it to be capable of in the future. So that sort of longer term vision for the software is still very much the domain of human engineers. What we're delivering in AI is vastly reducing the friction between where you are today and where you want to go to. So I'm actually really bullish about the software engineering industry because I think when software becomes a lot more predictable and you can get all of the features you want and you can get them reliably, I think people will invest more in software rather than less. So even as we drive up productivity, I hope we'll have the need for ever more software engineers.
I've got to imagine this greatly accelerates a team, what you're doing.
We certainly see that. We see teams delivering 50%, 2x productivity, and it's only accelerating. So the models have gotten so much better, even over the past year. I think things really inflected with Sonnet mid-year last year in terms of it breakthrough in code understanding. And then you could give the AI a task that might take a human engineer 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and it could go off and complete it. Now we're up to an hour kind of task. And the AI is ever more sufficient, at least ours is, because it has this deep understanding of the code base. So it can take on ever more complex tasks. And I think I don't see any reason that that's not going to continue to grow. But at the same time, we're very much about complementing human engineers, making them more productive, making their job more fun. Trying to take away the drudgery and the pain associated with evolving these tens of millions of line code bases.
One other thing too that you mentioned regarding this too is that there's the best code is code that you've already created that that works. And you mentioned sort of like surfacing redundant code, but the ability to identify a problem too and surface code that already exists for an individual so they don't have to go and find it or reconceptualize it too has to save an enormous amount of time.
Or, one of the problems with these naive AIs that don't understand your existing software is they're very good at proliferating code. So you start writing a new class, they're very happy to keep adding ever more software into the code base. Augment's still one of the only AIs that will detect and say, hey, there's code in here that we could reuse, or there's redundant code in here that we could delete.
Right.
And that's software engineering nirvana is getting rid of code, not adding more code.
Yes.
Scott, I have a couple questions. Two-part question. First question, what does your sales cycle look like? Who are you calling on? How are people finding out about you? How do customers experience Augment?
Yeah, so we really started selling the solution, third quarter last year, and it was at that point a lot of top-down conversations, through existing networks and investors and so on. We would call on VPs of engineering and CTOs that we had familiarity with. Things really changed early this year when we launched self-service. So, in general, software engineers that can't try out a product are suspicious of it right out of the gate, right? If you don't think your product is good enough to let anyone give it a try, they'll be very skeptical. And that self-service engine has exploded for us. So we just recently launched Agent, and the usage of the product has just grown from nothing to six figures of developers using the technology, and we've seen our consumption of tokens per minute. This is the inference that's used to run our agent. Has grown 15-fold just over the last month, and so you see this huge influx of developers discovering what the models are now capable of, and removing themselves from a lot of the less fun aspects of software engineering.
Totally. This might be a tricky question, but are you finding like the developers become your champion, or are you finding more it's like the leaders that see the efficiencies and the just the cost savings that they can drive out of it?
I would say the top-down leadership has a mandate to use AI, to take advantage of AI, and they see this space exploding, and so they're curious about it. But our bond is with the smart architects and the lead engineers. They're often individuals that have defected from other coding AIs because those coding AIs didn't keep up with them, didn't understand the software that they were working on. And so when they try Augment and they have this epiphany, like, wow, this is a fellow expert in my code base, right? I've spent years becoming an expert. Now I've got a co-programmer who is also an expert. And so their bond with the product is really what's driven this explosive growth that we're enjoying today.
Is there anything that you have experienced in the last 12 months that really surprised you that you weren't expecting, but kind of came out of the blue?
In AI, I would imagine just about everything.
Yeah, I know. Loaded question.
The market moves so insanely fast, right? So the models are getting better, well faster than my highest expectations. In terms of what agents are now capable of. I mean, we have engineers on the team. I think sometimes they do a little more work in order to get the agent to do everything for them, but it's like a point of pride that all they're doing is what I call meta programming, right? They're not actually writing code themselves. They're using the AI to manipulate the code, and they're telling the AI what they want, and then the AI goes off and does everything. I did not envision, that we would be there, and certainly not at the start of this year. The market is moving so much faster. Every quarter, I feel like we're compressing a year to 18 months of progress. What I've seen in, back in the .com days, and certainly in the flash storage days that preceded this. So, I mean, it's incredibly exciting. And one other thing about startups, especially a system software startup, is when you get surprised, it's almost always bad news, right? There's something broke, something went wrong. We still have those surprises, but now we have upside surprises where the AI does something that you were just completely not expecting and wowed by. Like the story I mentioned about deleting code or troubleshooting, an issue in the build and test environment, like a CI/CD pipeline issue, and the AI is able to diagnose what happened and even propose a fix. It's just like this emergent behavior where the AIs keep being able to deliver more insight into what's going on in your environment, or it's just really staggering.
There's two big areas I want to sort of talk about. One is can you talk about how you integrate with IDEs, with these development environments, and how all that works?
Yeah, so there are two broad approaches. So first of all, the IDE is where engineers spend the majority of the time, right? It's a portal that they trust and know into the code and into all the tooling that surrounds the code.
And they very much like working in their IDE. They don't like changing.
Yes. I certainly think that's true. And so from the outset, we wanted to use the IDE as our portal, as our delivery tool for the AI. And we wanted to preserve compatibility with the existing IDE ecosystems. So, VS Code from Microsoft is one of the most popular IDEs. They elected to open source it, and some of our competitors have taken that code base and forked it and changed it so that it's no longer compatible with the Microsoft ecosystem, but they have the ability to go in and change arbitrary things inside of the IDE. We didn't want to take that step. We thought the vast majority of the customers we target, the enterprise scale customers, value their Microsoft relationship and want to stay compatible with all of the plugins that work inside of VS Code. But there's another whole community that's at least as large on scale, which is JetBrains. In fact, in my career, I've spent a lot more time with JetBrains because of Java and then C and C++, where that tool set is much more popular. And so, being able to plug in to the existing IDEs and be able to just act in them with full compatibility with everything else that works in that environment was a big selling feature, especially up into the enterprise customers that we target.
Yeah, that's got to be a really important differentiator for you, I imagine.
Especially, so many of big companies, in fact, it's very rare to find a big company that's standardized on a single IDE, right? So different projects, different engineers have their own tool chains that work with them. And so compatibility with what is already there. We support VI as well. So Vim is now a solution, and I've got a buddy that's been putting an Emacs version together.
I was just going to ask you, if you got Vim, you got to have Emacs, because that debate never ends.
Yeah, when we launched Vim, I took some heat because I'm an old Emacs guy. But we had a particular customer, a couple of customers in the storage space. This is Data Direct Networks in Pure Storage, a fond spot for all of us, that they still use a lot of Vim and text editors in their practice. And so having an AI that works in those environments was a much easier sell to win those customers over.
I always liked Vim. The Emacs key bindings were just mind-numbing to me.
It was whatever you got started with, right? It's like switching was rough.
So I want to pivot to another area that I think is top of mind for so many enterprises, and that's security. And you have a lot of things to offer in that regard from many different angles. One is sort of the you mentioned the predictability that you can bring to the development process, and certainly predictability is a big component of designing security into your platform, right? But even beyond that, I mean, you're also dealing with a company's code base, which is the absolute crown jewels of companies, right? So you have to keep that secure too. So I mean, you are a security play from many different angles.
Yeah, there's two different levels of thinking about security. There is, the making sure that you're building in security into customer code, and part of our special secret sauce is that we are able to digest these large code bases, and that includes assimilating their security policies and best practices, and then using those security policies and best practices as we're generating new code and modifying existing code, so that we're doing so in a way that preserves all the properties of that system. But then there is, of course, the securing of our cloud service that the customers are making use of. And the way that we are able to deliver that knowledge of customer code is we do have to build a real-time semantic index of their code base, and we store artifacts in our cloud service in a highly secured way, so we can bring the right artifacts to bear for whatever AI task is at hand, so the model is able to understand the customer code and do the right thing. So I think we were the first of the solutions to get SOC compliance, both level 1, level 2, SOC 2, level 2, where we currently are. We've had continuous penetration testing on the platform. We have engineers from places like Databricks and Snowflake that have very strong security credentials, and so we built this architecture to make sure that we were fully hardened to be able to protect our customers' intellectual property.
So Scott, I mean, we've talked about some really key differentiators. I don't see a lot of competition doing what you guys do exactly. I mean, what would you consider the big things that like you're not going to get anywhere else?
Yeah, so I think the things that the primary thing that differentiates us is this ability to understand a large complex code base, and then we do very well winning over these enterprise scale customers. But self-service has brought 6 figures of developers from all over the world that just want an AI that's more expert, that is able to hang with them in terms of whatever it is that they're working on. And I would say that the competitive landscape continues to evolve. Most of the customers we encounter have some experience with AI for code. GitHub Copilot has often been in the account ahead of us. What we at least seem to find is a lot of the senior architects have elected to move away from it because it hasn't been able to keep pace with them, and so they don't feel like it's a good partner. Creates a big opportunity for us to go in. Especially our pricing is usage based. So if you don't use the product, you don't pay for it. So it's a really easy insert into an existing shop that's using GitHub Copilot. It's like anyone's welcome to try it, and you get a bunch of chits. And if you use those chits up, we'll give you more. I would say the landscape has changed though. We see significantly more cursor now in a lot of our accounts. It's also a very popular solution, probably coming more from the Vibe end, but we've definitely encountered it in some larger enterprise customers now. One fun stat is we get 1,500 cursor developers per day coming to Augment, where they replace the cursor AI with Augment's AI inside of the cursor ID because they're getting better support for whatever task that they're doing at hand. But it's going to stay a ferociously competitive market given the scale, right? This is a $1 trillion spent per year on software engineers around the world, and so there's I think all of them are going to be using AI, and with the material productivity improvements that come with that, I think we're going to continue to see a ferocious fight.
Exactly. So Scott, where does Augment go from here?
We are still in such early days of this market, and in terms of how much I think the AIs are going to be capable of accomplishing. We're continuing right now to hone our agent platform to be able to deliver much more capability to do ever more and richer tasks on behalf of the software engineer. I would say that is the chief excitement for this year. Every engineer wants to be a tech lead and be able to farm out the tasks that they're not excited about. In this case, an AI can go off and do these things quickly, and we'll continue to improve the results and how long what kind of sophistication the AI is capable of in terms of completing those long-term tasks. But I look, as you look forward, there's so much more opportunity. If you take something like code reviews, there's so much insight that's captured in there. How can I bring that to bear across a large code base and say, where is this code base deviating from, policies and best practices? Where are the opportunities to improve quality? The U.S. economy alone lost $2.5 trillion last year due to software failures. How can we go in and troubleshoot the software before it breaks, or when it does break, because software will continue to break? It's great if the AI wakes up first before the human gets woken up and starts offering the human insight into what happened and what mitigations might make sense. So there's just and engineering management is another area. We've been helping individual engineers, but we haven't yet crossed the chasm to help management see what's going on with their code base and find additional opportunities to improve quality or to optimize. So I think we're going to have just an insanely fun next 5 years. Can't imagine what we're going to see.
Another thing you mentioned that the incredible trillions of dollars of losses from software defects, but I want to also mention that there's been an interesting in the like ransomware, for example. The initial vectors for ransomware was credential compromise for many years, but now it's been software defects that have recently bypassed that. So in order to make yourself secure, these are really important kinds of steps to take in terms of the code reviews and things like that to make sure you're building safe stuff.
And there's, you can look at code change history in order to identify common characteristics of defects that might still be in the code base, and then proactively identify them and fix them before they cause a problem. So we're going to get much higher quality software. It's going to be a lot more predictable. And it's ultimately the barriers to giving us the features that we want have been vastly reduced. And I think that's even going to go back to really old ossified code, right? There's a ton of code that is just never changed because it's viewed as fragile because nobody's around who really understands it. That fragility is going to go away. We'll be able to feel comfortable that we can understand any piece of software. We've had customers tell us they started deleting their documentation because it's better to ask Augment real time what's happening inside the code base than reading docs that are maybe stale and out of date or not well written. And so I think that's a kind of way to keep all this software fresh all the time.
Yeah, you can spend less time digging through documents and more time doing stuff.
100%.
A great message that I'm getting from this is you're still recommending computer science for a major in college. It sounds like you're pro computer science.
Very much so. The human guidance for the software process is still so essential. I mentioned the agents being able to generate nearly 100% of the code now with a lot of coaching from a human, and that it's that coaching that's crucial because the human spots the direction and leads the evolution, but the AI does the busy work of casting it into the concrete code that you need to run it. I think that is going to continue to be the case for a good while. It's possible the advent of super intelligence, sometimes called AGI, changes that, then maybe the software can, or the AI can figure out exactly what kind of software humans need and want. But that feels like a good ways off to me, even with this extraordinary process we're seeing in the underlying models.
So if somebody wants to hook up with Augment, how do they find you?
So augmentcode.com is the website. The product is available for anyone to trial. If you have VS Code, if you have any of the JetBrains products like IntelliJ or PyCharm, you're more than free to grab it. And Vim, Emacs not yet, but hopefully soon. So by all means, grab the product, give it a try. We have a context sales for larger organizations, but small organizations can do everything they need online. We got to the 6-figure of developer customers through self-service, where we didn't even have to talk to them, and that's one of the really exciting things about how fast this market moves.
No doubt.
For sure.
No doubt. Well, you guys heard it here. If you want to hook up with Augment, you know how to find them. I also want to point out that Chris and I do a lot of research on AI companies, specifically startups. And we're trying to find those winners. And some of the things that we look for is not just the tech and like the market that they're trying to go after, but the people behind it is always very, very, very critical. And that's why when I saw some of the crew getting together here, I was like, okay, something cool is happening here. Yeah, we follow the money, but we really also follow the people. And so, to your guys' credit, it's not just the tech, but I can see you building a great company. And that is really, really cool. So congratulations and thank you so much for joining Chris and I.
Very much appreciate the kind words, and Sandesh and Chris, always great to hang out. Look forward to checking back in down the road and talking about the latest developments in this topsy-turvy market.
Sounds great. And I'm sure you're going to have yet another home run here. So good luck with everything.
We'll do our best.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. All the best, gents. Cheers.
Well, that's the show. But before you roll, sales pitch warning. We're building more than a brand here. We're building a community. So your support means everything to us. So please like, comment, subscribe, follow, and also reach out to us directly. We want to hear from you. Thank you so much for your support. Until next time.